Good morning from Hopalong Hollow. What a glorious day. You can see here I've been picking up Peabody boy feathers because this is the time of year when the peacocks start dropping their feathers all over the yard. This is how fast goslings grow. Look at the size of this boy and girl. These were the babies. They are bigger than ducks now and nearly as big as the adult geese. They still sound like babies, though. They act like babies. Look at this boy. He doesn't know how big he is. He's terrified of the peacock, though. Don't blame him. Peacocks can be pretty ferocious sometimes, especially when it comes to bread. They like to eat that bread. This has been such a good nursery trough. Mentioned it before because I put zinnia seeds in this one because I wasn't sure where I wanted them. What spaces I would need to fill in the garden later on. And now I've been able to put a bunch of them in the potager after I cleared out that spot. So polar bear zinnias went into the garden the other day, and then I'm going to take the rest of these out, put them in another garden where I've got empty spaces. I did it with all the snapdragons, and wow, this has been, I'm going to do this from now on. Forget those trays, forget all that stuff, forget the soil blocks. I'm doing this. Really, really worked. It is such a satisfying feeling when you finally get to the point where you feel like you have completed your garden chores and now you get to sit back and just watch the garden grow. And I am finally at that point where I've pretty much accomplished everything that needed to be done at this time of the year. Although I'm a little bit late on some of my things. And it shows, as you can see how sparse my poor little vegetable patch is right there. Because I got them in so late. That's okay, I have every confidence that they will be growing thick and full and producing vegetables and fruits. But I actually have been at the gardening since January. I started clearing out the beds and planting winter seeds and doing bulbs way back. So I finally get to take a break, and I'm actually pretty happy that I can finally get over there and sit on my porch and do my artwork, which is really what I'm supposed to be doing because that's what I do for a living. Gardening is just my hobby. So here, finally, at last, the beautiful little potager is in one of its third stages and looking very Hopalong Hollow-like. Hopalong Hollow scaping has definitely been put to use in this little garden, as it always is, where you can see that I repeated a lot of elements. I've moved my homemade cloches right there along with the little wattle fence. I'm using a lot of teepees. I've decided that along this strip I have put in white polar bear zinnias that were growing in my little nursery bed. The rosemaries have been uncovered because I dug up all the oxeye daisies. Well, I didn't dig them up, I just cut them way down. They will have another growth season. This bed, which was full of cottage flowers, 3 weeks ago, is now got dwarf blueberry bushes and strawberries and a few flowers as well, which will be coming up, we hope. About the potager, it changes all the time. I love the cottage gardens, I do. I love the cutting gardens, but the potager, it just keeps on changing from week to week, and now it's completely different than it was 2 weeks ago. It has a nice clean look right now. Of course, it's a garden, and these things will all fill in. It won't look nearly as tidy in about a month, but it will be producing. Now, I am not the queen of the vegetable garden, that's for sure. You can go to YouTube and find all kinds of really good gardeners that know all about their veggies. I'm not one of them. I'm really the flower person. And even in that respect, I'm just an amateur. But if anybody can grow tomatoes and peppers, you can, and I can. Anybody can grow tomatoes and peppers. And you can try a few more exotic things as well. Strawberries are pretty easy as well. And I just grow the basics, because that's really what we use. And herbs are so easy to grow. Anybody can grow herbs. I love the use of the clay pots as the finials on this Protege fence, because I get to change the flowers whenever I want to. So far, when this first went in, I used succulents in every single pot, and that was last summer. And then I got those and put those somewhere else, and then I put in tulip bulbs, hyacinth bulbs, and so each one of these had tulips popping out of the top. That was in the spring. Then I tried petunias, and those were a total flop. In fact, I nearly killed every one of them. I don't know why petunias should be so difficult to grow, but they were in these pots. I since moved them to a planter. So here now I have my scented geraniums, which is a tradition for me to plant geraniums in the garden always, somewhere, because to me it's just reminiscent of Mr. McGregor's little scented geranium in Peter Rabbit, one of my favorite illustrations. These we picked up at the plant sale at the high school, so they're just babies right now. And I don't plant directly into the pot. I put the plastic container in the pot. That way I do get to change quite frequently from one plant to the next. I really love this strip in the Protege because it is such a layered bed. Started out by planting hundreds of bulbs down the center of this bed back in January. Could have been December, I don't really remember. I did a video on that. And so coming up in the spring, right down the center here, were beautiful pink Darwin hybrid tulips, which are perennials. So I left the bulbs in after they were spent. I left those bulbs in there, so hopefully they will come right back next year in this very same bed. Also, muscaris and blue azurium alliums were planted here. So that was a beautiful showing in the spring down the center of the bed. At the same time, the catmint was still going strong because it actually survived throughout the whole winter, and it had beautiful little light purple blooms on it. I've since pruned it way, way down. And also the sage, which grows along this edge, had beautiful purple spikes that were showing up all the way along this edge of the bed. The chard was growing, except that the chard was all the way down through this section, growing alongside broccoli and cabbages, which were just so stunning, and I thought, oh, Mr. McGregor would be so proud of these cabbages. And then I found that they had cabbage worms on them, and it ended up that all my cabbages and broccoli went to the donkeys. So at least they didn't go to waste. Somebody is very happy about these alliums. I think alliums really seriously are one of my favorite bulbs. Even more than tulips. Because they give you a lot more than tulips do. Tulips are so brief. They're stunning, but brief. Alliums come back every year. They multiply. The bees love them. The little insects love them. The little flies, the little wasps, they love these. You can dry these. You can collect seed from these. They're just such a great plant, and they come in so many sizes, varieties, and colors. I always recommend alliums. I've done a whole video on that. But they won't last forever. And so down the center here, because I always want something going down the center of a bed, I've repeated the polar bear zinnias. Just 1, 2, 3, was pretty sparse with the zinnia planting down the center because I don't want the zinnias taking over the entire bed. And zinnias get very, very full. They have leaves all the way down to the ground, and then they will produce just dozens and dozens of flowers upon each stem. So I have my ornamentals down the center. I want to keep them down the center. And then my productive and edible things along the edges here. So this catmint, which has already been pruned way, way down. And I plant this for my cat, Claudette. She actually does like this. That's the only purpose for this, and the fact that it's very beautiful. It's called Nepeta. It's a cat mint. It's really not an invasive mint at all. I sort of wish that it would drop more seeds and give me more volunteers, but it really doesn't do that. And then along this edge, this is purple sage, which we do use a little bit of sage in cooking, but mostly I like it because I want those spiky purple flowers. They have also been pruned way down. I just get the clippers and I just go chop, chop, chop. And I cut these plants way, way down. It gives them a second growth. And then along here, I've put in seed for more chard. It's just now starting to come up too. And it was just put that in a couple days ago. There's a stray piece of grass, we don't want that. And then on that side, I did anise hyssop, because it'll be about 2 to 3 foot tall. It's seed. It will be ornamental as well, but it'll get tall enough to provide a little bit of shade on this side, which I think the chard will appreciate. This chard's gotten way too tall. I need to cut that down a bit and start eating it. Or this guy can eat some of it too, I suppose. It looks like you already have been. Well, somebody's been chomping on this chard. I just love the color of this Bright Lights chard. You can stir fry these stalks, and then I just use the leaves for the salads. There's some more of those geraniums. I love this. I love this thing. If you have a nice big planter, you can really do some layered plantings in it. So underneath here were the hyacinth, the muscari, and some ivory alliums. They came up in the spring. They're still in there. Those bulbs are going to come back again next year. But on top of that are the chives, which are just starting to open, and nasturtium seeds. So the nasturtium seeds growing alongside these slender stalks of chive, which I think are so beautiful. And the difference here with these like lily pad sort of leaves is a beautiful combination. A really nice contrast, not only in color, but in shape and size. These are ivory colored and maroon colored nasturtiums, not your typical bright colored nasturtiums. It's good to have a nice comfortable place to sit right in the middle of your garden. Sometimes though you just want to plunk yourself right down in the middle of your garden, sit on the ground, and look at things from a different perspective. At this time, I'm sitting on the other side of the Protege, which is across the picket fence, across the stone walkway, and enclosed by an antique metal fence, some antique rusty old headboards and footboards, yes, and cattle panel. And in this garden, I am looking at plants from the bottom up. which is a pretty magnificent and fun thing to do, because right now I am looking at this wonderful and incredible sunflower, which is at this point 10.5 feet tall. We measure it about every 3 days. It just grows and grows and grows. Look at the size of the leaves on this thing. Look at the sturdy and incredible stalk on the sunflower. It's just amazing. This comes out of a little seed, a little striped black and white seed. Oh, the miracle of life. And we did not even plant these this year. They just planted themselves from last year's sunflowers. The birds didn't get all those seeds. Many of them dropped and planted a lot more sunflowers for us. One of the happiest flowers, in my opinion. I think everybody loves sunflowers. Also growing in this side of the potager are little cantaloupes, small watermelons, which are going to be climbing up the panel, 3 blueberry bushes, more tomato plants, there are squashes and cucumbers, and yesterday, just along this edge, I planted some squashes to go up the cast iron fence. This whole place is enclosed with chicken wire. Chicken wire is not very attractive, but it's virtually invisible if you look at it from afar. You really can't see it, but we really need it for the free-range chickens, or they'd be in here every day having a party in this straw. And I want this straw here because this really keeps the weeds out of this bed. I don't use it in any other bed. I really like the dark black compost in a vegetable bed, but this one just gets to be too weedy if I don't lay down the straw. So we also have some very healthy and good-looking raspberry bushes behind that cattle panel, and not a whole lot. Most of the things that I planted in here, they take up a lot of space, so they will be covering the ground. But another reason you want to just sit down in the middle of your garden and say, hey, I think I'm finished for a while, and now I can go do something else. And that's exactly what I am going to do. I'm going to do something else. Today's bouquet we have, this is called Vitex. It's from the chaste bush. And this beautiful bush just grows to great sizes and heights for a bush or a small tree. And it's in full bloom right now, so I'll probably film it next week because it's just absolutely stunning. We also have the last of our little daisies from the Protege until they come back in about 2 months. Several different colors of bee balm, monarda, bergamot also known as. We've got the dark maroon, the pale purple, and the beautiful pink ones, which I think are my favorites at this point. And here we have a beautiful cottage flower called phlox. I talk about phlox a lot. Phlox grows in many of these gardens. It gets to be, can get to be 3, 4, 5 foot tall. So you want to put that in the back of your garden. We have lots of beautiful little bachelor buttons. Bachelor buttons have a lot of interesting stories about them and a lot of beliefs. One belief in the Middle Ages was that if a maiden put a bachelor button beneath her apron, she could win the heart of any bachelor that she desired. Also called cornflowers because they grow beautifully in between rows of corn, but the stalks were so strong that they often dulled the reaping tools, and so another name for the bachelor button was the hurt sickle. I think that one's pretty cute. Lastly, I've used the leaves of the Baptisia, also known as false indigo. I love the beautiful pale translucent green of these leaves. This is a member of the pea family. So, today's bouquet at the end of June. So isn't it nice to be able to sit back after all the work that you've put into your garden and just enjoy it? And one of my favorite places to work on my artwork is actually on the porch. So I'm sitting right here with the potager in front of me. Then I've got the cutting garden over there, another cutting garden over there. And I can pretty much enjoy the garden as I sit here and do my work. And today I am working on needle felting. I am needle felting bears today. Generally I pick up my subject and then I'll make maybe anywhere from 5 to 10 of that. So I have bears here in various stages of development. I think I like this one the best. So I'm getting ready for some shows that are coming up, and they're important shows, so I really need to replenish my needle felting. Sometimes I sit here and I paint. Sometimes I sit here and I work on book illustration or I draw. But this is when I'm going to be sitting here and working on needle felting. And the tools that I need for needle felting are little barbed needles of different gauges. As you can see here, there are multiple needles, there are single needles, and each one of these needles has little hooks and barbs in the tip. They're very, very fine. I mean, you have to look at them with a microscope basically to see those little barbs. But what those little barbs do is that when you poke your wool, which is the material that you're going to be working with, it hooks the fibers together. It connects the fibers, and then the piece of wool that you're working on becomes denser and harder, and eventually you're able to actually sculpt your wool. So my material that I use is sheep's wool. This is sheep's wool batting of alpaca and sheep's wool. Alpaca is not that easy to needle felt because it's so fine and silky, so I always mix it with some sheep's wool, and I've just carded this wool together to give me a little more cooperative wool. Each one of these creatures takes an enormous amount of time, because even though you're starting out with a big ball of nice wool, and you're condensing it way, way down and making it denser and harder until you're able to sculpt the wool. So you might start out with a big ball of wool like this and end up with a tiny little head like that. But it's nice and hard, and then you're able to work with it. But I also build each one of these creatures over a wire armature. That gives them a little bit better structure, and also it makes them posable. Now, I don't give classes and I don't do tutorials on needle felting. I just wouldn't see the wisdom in my doing that, seeing as I do this for a living and I sell my characters at shows. Of course, there's plenty of places where you can learn how to do needle felting, and I find that people either love doing it or they just absolutely hate doing it. You have to have a lot of patience to do it, because you are just poking and poking and poking into that wool thousands upon thousands of times in order to get your character to form. Start out with a nice big handful of wool, but as the more you poke it and roll it and shape it with your needle, you're going to end up with something this small. So it does take an awful lot of poking, and it does take an awful lot of wool in order to get to the point where you actually got a little head going. So I basically do all my heads at once. I might do 5 to 10 to 20 heads. Yeah, I have a little basket full of cat heads right here. They don't have any bodies, but there are plenty of little breeds of kitty cats in here. I'll do those after I do the bears, but I did, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 bears, and this is the one I'm working on now. But what I'm doing basically is I'm sculpting my little character and poking and poking and poking with the different gauges of needles. Some are for fine work, some are for deep work or wide work, and I'm just adding the wool as I go and creating a character. So what I use for models when I'm doing a particular animal is either photographs, or I just refer to my own work. So in this book, Mamsie Bear and Mopkin, I did countless paintings of bears, so I often refer to that. Okay, and here's a live model. If I'm doing a cat, I got a live model right here. She won't hold still for me for very long. Okay, Claudette, hey, you're blocking the view, girl. So in Mamsie Bear and Mop Kit, I drew and painted countless bears in all sorts of positions. So it really does help to just refer to my own work. I've made this fox many times in needle felting. Happy that I have this book that I can refer to when I'm making my bears. Actually, I'm sold out of this book at the moment and won't have any of these books until the end of the year. But in the meantime, I've got a lot of little critters to refine and fix and create. But I've also got something here which may be of interest to those of you who live near Asheville, North Carolina, and may be interested in attending this show. And that's what I'm preparing a lot of these creatures for. This show is July 18th through the 21st, and they always give us about 10 free tickets to hand out. Generally it costs, I think around $10 or $12 to get into the show. It's a pretty high-end, nice-looking show. Everybody in this show belongs to the Southern Highlands Craft Guild. You have to be juried in a pretty strict process. So I have 10 free tickets here. I want to give away two to 5 people. That way you can bring somebody with you. But if you think that you, not if you think, if you know that you would actually attend this show, just be one of the first 5 people to ask for the free tickets, and I will send them your way. In the meantime, going back to my little needles here and my wool. So from Hopalong Hollow, this is Jerry, and we'll see you next time.